girlfriend Haley Poland and his mom Diana Steele were all out for a walk. Ed shot at them 6 times with an illegally modified Bushmaster AR-15. Though no one was shot, Ed held the trio at gunpoint near the home, but not on Ed's property. Ed approached Diana and punched her in the face, and then stabbed Haley in the stomach with a 10-inch knife. He then took a cell phone from them, preventing them from calling for help.
He was holding us captive right in front of his house, and he proceeded to go after her, and me protecting her, he stabbed me in the process. Almost went through the pancreas.
After Ed was arrested and charged, he was released on a $160,000 cash bond. His mother bailed him out and also paid about $10,000 in legal fees for her son. After this incident, Ed deteriorated further. About 9 months before the shooting, Ed was served a restraining order that was issued to protect his neighbors. The order required that Ed surrender his firearms, but he only gave up 1 gun. The restraining order expired in September of 2017, but was renewed just before the shooting. Still, Ed continued to harass the family. The day before the shooting, Ed called his mom and said he was fed up with his neighbors, saying they were making meth and that, quote, "It's all over now." Ed was insistent that Danny was making meth, and was constantly calling the police about it. Police searched Danny's home many times and found absolutely no evidence of a meth lab. Ed claims that there were always smells from the meth cooking, but no one else ever smelled it. Nothing was being done, because nothing nefarious was happening. Yet still, Ed continued to become enraged at the lack of police action. Ed and Barbara lived in a run-down trailer that was full of junk, including scrap cars, tools, and old TV sets. The couple had 9 dogs, and the property they lived on was in rather poor disrepair. Gutters were falling from the roof and hanging, like a sheet of metal, in front of the trailer, and the place looked downright scary. Family members were constantly asking Ed to get help by this point. He continuously refused, and his mom and sister were considering trying to get involuntary inpatient treatment for him before the shooting. Ed had several brushes with the police before the eventual downfall. He was arrested in 1989 in North Carolina for disorderly conduct and obstructing a police officer. In 1992, he was arrested for possession of marijuana with intent to sell. He was arrested yet again in 2006 for assault with a deadly weapon, and again in 2013 for a hit-and-run in California, though it doesn't appear that arrest resulted in a conviction. Before the shooting, Ed's behavior had escalated so badly that neighborhood children weren't allowed to play outside for fear of being shot. Ed was shooting his weapons at such a rate that some described the neighborhood as sounding like a war zone. Yet the residents were so used to nothing happening, they stopped calling the police. A GoFundMe was established for the families of the victims, both the deceased and injured. The account for Tiffany's family raised over $67,000 for the care and rehabilitation of the young mother and her boys. Surviving neighbors of the shooter later stated that they wished the sheriff's department would have taken their complaints about the gunfire from his property more seriously. However, the sheriff's office later issued a responding statement that they had done everything legally possible regarding all complaints. Gage went to live with his maternal grandmother, who reports that the young boy has struggled to move on following the murder of his father and grandmother. For a long time, he worried that the bad man was going to find him and get him. His grandmother did everything in her power to assure the brave young boy that he had nothing to fear from his neighbor anymore. Gage has already suffered so much loss at such a tender age, and our hearts ache for him. The shooter's trailer was eventually bulldozed, which was appropriate for the place that housed so much evil. We all have the unique ability to help prevent such a catastrophic event from happening. If we keep our eyes and ears open and never hesitate to report when something or someone just doesn't seem right, it is our sincerest wish that there will be no more active or mass shooting stories to tell. We pray that love will prevail over hate. In the meantime, we urge our listeners to stay aware of your surroundings and to keep in touch with your loved ones. If you see something, say something. You never know how many lives you'll be saving.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Active Shooter, the podcast. Remember, if you see something, say something. There's no telling how many lives you may be saving.
A huge thank you to Darren Curtis, who composed some of the music used in this episode. Check him out at darrencurtismusic.com. DARRENCURTIS music.com.
Active shooter, reports of an active shooter,
mass casualty incidents.
Make sure to check us out on social media. We have a discussion group on Facebook. Just search for Active Shooter, the podcast discussion group. You can also find us on Instagram at Active the Podcast and Twitter at Podcast Active. For just $1 a month, you can get access to ad-free episodes, early release episodes when available, and a shout-out on the show. Just go to patreon.com/Active the Podcast. Thank you, and be safe.
I'm Paige, the host of Reverie True Crime. I tell stories of helpless victims, vicious killers, predators watching their prey before they strike, survivors, petty crimes, people we think we know who do the unthinkable, and the dangers that lurk not only in the dead of night, but in plain sight in the light of day. Every once in a while, I'll also tell stories of the frightening paranormal, elusive cryptids, haunted locations, and conspiracies that may be silly or thought-provoking. You can listen to Reverie True Crime wherever you're listening to this podcast. Feel free to follow me on Twitter at Reverie Crime Pod, Facebook, Instagram, and even Tumblr at Reverie True Crime. Remember, stay safe, be aware of your surroundings at all times, and take care.